Good evening, everyone. Slightly later than scheduled, just a couple of minutes, a few technical hitches. Welcome to another Premier Pundits live podcast. Myself and Jason will be looking ahead to game week 11 FPL, and we've got some snorters to look forward to. So without any further ado, Mr. McKenna's in the house. How the devil are you, my friend?
I tell you what, Ben, I think I'm in a really elated mood at the moment because as I was preparing for this, I went downstairs, chatted with my family, and then I realised that it was the first home Arsenal game with fans, since probably about March time. And I don't know, I got a little bit teary-eyed. I was a bit emotional. I was like, oh my God, football is kind of back to normality.
For you, not for me.
Yeah,
for you, not for me.
Yeah, but at least some football is back, and I know obviously across the country, it pales in comparison to obviously the terrible things that have happened during this COVID. But with the news of the vaccine, with things, people going to football matches, maybe, just maybe, we're on the horizon of positivity. So I'm really happy at the moment, Ben. How are you doing?
Well, look, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I will give you that, Jason. But yes, mate, look, it's, we're heading into, unfortunately, our Newcastle, my team, our game was called off on Friday night due to, Public Health England called that game off after Newcastle put a request in with the Premier League. So, I really do. I love it, an early deadline. I love a Friday night match, especially when it's my home team. And it was against Villa. So I'm a little bit disappointed that's not going ahead. It's obviously caused some massive problems within the community. Villa players heavily owned throughout. And Callum Wilson features in a lot of teams. So there's managers going into this game. We could potentially, well, as it stands, there are 4 players who will not be involved. There's still hope that it could be rearranged and maybe tagged on to the end of this game week. But there's so many factors that need to be considered and boxes that need to be ticked before any of that can be considered at this moment in time. But like you say, light at the end of the tunnel, off the back of a fairly decent game week. So positive. I like the look of my team. Not have concerns around Manchester City, which we'll probably touch upon. But yeah, look, if I can back last week's decent points haul up with another solid game week, that'll put us back in the running and hopefully break back into that top 1 million, because that's really where I need to be at this moment in time. So I'm not aiming too high. I'm being realistic, and I'll take top 1 million the way it's went in a couple of those game weeks.
I suppose as well, I've mentioned Christmas and we have talked about this off air. I don't know if you want to announce it, but we are going to run a competition leading up to Christmas for people to win a £50 Amazon gift card. So everybody, all the viewers in here today, anybody listening, if you can get your friends, family to sign up as well, it puts you in the raffle to win. I mean, Ben, do you want to explain the competition, how it's going to run, and how to get your hands on an extra 50 quid towards your Christmas holidays?
Yeah, so we're going to be running the competition in the build up to Christmas. It will coincide, I think, with game week 13, 14. Basically, the set of fixtures just before the Christmas. So those will conclude, I think, around about December the 20th, December the 21st, depending on maybe TV schedule. And yeah, look, if you come along and you join us on our live podcast, you ask a question within the chat box, your name will go into that hat. And hopefully, if you come along to that, to that final show, we can all sort of take part in that live Q&A and do the draw, for one lucky person. And we'll get that sent straight out. And hopefully, postal, the post box, dependent, will that hopefully arrive before Christmas. So a nice little stocking filler, pushed through your letterbox.
I love it. And, this is why we say we're here for the community. We want to give back to everybody and get people involved and spread some positivity around Christmas. So, it's a really happy kind of period. I'm feeling on top of the world at the moment, Ben, about it. But, let's go into the injury news because there are some things here. Obviously, we've got the Newcastle Villa situation. I don't know if you can clear things up there, but there's also 3 players that I've got an eye on, a little bit worried about. You've got Kane. Is Mourinho playing mind games there? Martial, is he going to be returning to the Manchester United front line? And also, one of our favourite assets, Danny Ings, is he going to be hopeful for a return? Maybe not this weekend, but maybe the weekend after, or will he be trialled in this game against Brighton?
Well, that's the big question. Southampton don't play until Monday night. It's a South Coast derby against Brighton. And the expectation is that Danny Ings will actually recover and be part of that 18-man squad. Ralph Hasenhüttl was fairly confident last weekend that Danny Ings would progress, and suffice to say that he should be named in that squad. Of course, I wouldn't expect him to be thrown straight back in. Danny Ings is coming off the back of an injury. He's been out almost in and around sort of a month now, so he will take a little bit of time just to get that sharpness back. But also, Shea Adams and Theo Walcott have done a fairly decent job, in attack. A little bit unfortunate maybe against Manchester United last weekend. But, barring those, that defeat, prior to that, they had some great results. So, the good news is Danny Ings should be back. And by the time the festive programme rolls along, he should have got some decent minutes under his belt, and he should hit the ground running, over those sort of key fixture period.
So would you risk Danny Ings at all, bring him into your team, or is it a little bit premature to do it already? Because we know what an amazing hitman he is. He's very low owned in the community, but on the flip side, Southampton are in amazing form. They're looking good in attack. Their attacking data is one of the best in the league. So I'm really kind of half, waiting with bated breath to see him back in that lineup. But would I be a little bit dangerous in kind of bringing him in this week even?
It would be a little bit premature, certainly for me. I go back to what I said. I wouldn't expect Danny Ings to start. But given the form that he's been in, since Project Restart, that's not to say that Danny Ings would be introduced from the bench and can quite easily notch or play a part in the goal. So, I wouldn't rule out any kind of points return given any amount of minutes that he'll have on the bench. Certainly when you've got the likes of maybe James Ward-Prowse and the form he's in and set pieces, and so he's always a threat and he's a danger. And like you say, Southampton in good form. It's a good game. It's a derby game. It'll be blood and guts. It'll be thunder, and it may take somebody like Danny Ings just that little bit of quality to maybe unlock that Brighton defence and maybe turn the tide towards maybe a Southampton win. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that game. I think is it one that we'll be covering, which is always nice. I think it's the last game on Monday night. So.
Well, you've got Ward-Prowse. I might be getting him in my team because I think he's such a great asset. So, we'll be having keen eyes on that, and also the opportunity for us to maybe rip into Brighton once again because we haven't been keen on them this season. But just 2 more there that I want to focus, and you can bring more into the discussion. Martial. Now, one of the things that I've noticed over the last few weeks, and we'll go into this a little bit more, is Man United are now suddenly producing high quality chances or improving with their attacks going forward, but nobody's putting them away apart from Bruno Fernandes. So if Martial is getting back to fitness or into that side, will he be featuring this weekend at all?
This is a little bit of a conundrum in terms of where United are at, and it could be dependent upon other factors. There will be, a lot of people advocating the introduction of Edison Cavani. He changed the game at St Mary's, Southampton, scored twice, involved in the Bruno goal as well. And people are saying, he should be rewarded for that. Then we had the incident post-match with the social media post. that was quickly put down. We haven't had any word from the FA with regards to a potential ban. And my own opinion is that, we will see a ban for Cavani. I think, if we look at maybe Bernardo last season, who had a similar position, when he was called out Benjamin Mendy, and that resulted in a one-match ban. And I think that will be, along the same lines. Now, inherently, the Football Association they always seem to drag their feet when it comes to these types of injuries. So incidents, sorry. So looking ahead to this weekend, I certainly expect, as it stands, Cavani to be available, and he's got to be in with a really strong chance of starting that game. Whether Martial is up 100%, we missed. He missed last weekend's game due to illness, and then he missed sessions earlier this week, although he did return in the Champions League. However, if Ollie wants to sort of change things up a little bit, we also have Marcus Rashford, who's struggling with an ongoing shoulder problem. It's the same shoulder problem that he picked up prior to the international break that kept him out of England's internationals. And he's sort of been patched up and pushed out. But he's still been involved in every game, and he's still playing a lot of minutes. So again, it's not something which is what I would say is major or significant. It's about pain management at this moment in time. And if, like I say, maybe if it was one of the lesser so-called teams, then maybe it would be, maybe Rashford could be rested ahead of that. But this weekend, I'm still hopeful, very hopeful, because obviously he's me captain, that Rashford will start this weekend, and I've got an inkling that Cavani might just get the nod. It's a similar situation with Chelsea and Giroud after scoring 4 midweek. If you're not in that starting 11, you're knocking on the manager's door and you're saying, Gaffer, what have I got to be doing here? I cannot play any better. I'm going out there. I'm producing, the goods. I'm delivering. I deserve my chance in that starting 11. And Cavani has been knocking on the door. So I think he's fully deserved a place in that side.
So let's move it on to the last one that I'm worried about, because he's in my team. He's in loads of the community's teams. And honestly, I know how much he loves the North London derby, and I was considering the sacrilegious act of actually captaining Harry Kane against my own side. But is he really injured? I mean, we know how good Mourinho is with mind games. Is this all just kind of hearsay to put us off the scent of Harry Kane being fighting fit and probably as ready as ever for a North London derby as historically he's ever been?
This is a strange one, because there had been no wind of any issues whatsoever with Harry in the build-up or prior to Wednesday's press conference when Mourinho spoke. He played 90 minutes against Chelsea. It looked as if he came through that unscathed. He would have been given Monday off, so maybe a light recovery session, and there would have been some maybe light work on Tuesday, and then possibly a little bit on Wednesday morning prior to Mourinho speaking. The fact that he came out and he said, "Look, I'm not willing to disclose what the actual issue is," in itself is a little bit strange. But then for him to come out and say, "Look, it's my own opinion that I think you'll be fit and I think you'll be fine." And we talk about these international injuries. Well, I almost get the impression that this is a Europa League injury, almost to cover himself, because he wanted to take some of his key players out of that starting 11 and, just remove them, give them the complete night off. If Tottenham win or, get the points and what have you, then great. But if Tottenham were to lose tonight, then and Kane wasn't involved, then you have sections of the media and you have supporters who will question his thinking in and around that. By saying that he's picked up a slight problem or a niggle, he mitigates all of that. Then the onus is taken away from him. It's not a decision that he's made. the injury has forced him out. So, if Tottenham were to get beat, for example, well, that's just one of those things, and we didn't have Harry available. I just think it's good man management. They've had a very busy fixture period, and I'm 100%, 99% confident that Harry Kane will be involved in the North London derby.
I mean, I don't know whether I should feel good or bad about that because, I'm an Arsenal fan and I don't want to see Tottenham anywhere near the top of the league. But at the same time, I want my fantasy team to do well. And he might be a differential pick for the captaincy this weekend. But with this kind of news about the Villa-Newcastle match, one of the discussion points in the community, one of the things that came to my head was obviously maybe we need to buffer the benches because we are building up to that Christmas period time as well. We need some key picks that are nailed in their squads, may also be potential point returners, but are fairly lowly priced. So I picked a few from a few teams that I think are going to do well over this Christmas period in terms of cheap bargain defenders and enabler midfielders. In terms of forwards, the only one that I really would tell people to get is Che Adams, 5.9. I think that's very cheap for a striker. But apart from that, the other options I thought were just maybe a waste of money, and you could put that into a better midfielder or defender. So I'll put them to you, Ben. We'll start off with the defenders. You can tell me your opinions on them as well. But I've got data, I've got numbers to back it up, and I tell you what, a lot of these are also very differential ones, so you might like them for your own team as well.
I'm all ears, Jason. I'm all ears.
Yeah, I could see your ears actually prick up when I said the word differential.
Yeah.
They're like little, I don't know, radio signals, and okay, differential. So first ones are Taylor and Loughton from Burnley, both 4.4 as defenders. Now, we discussed this at the start of the season. We weren't too keen on Burnley because of their injury record and small squad. But once again, Sean Dyche is proving his quality as a manager. They did get shellacked 5-0 by Man City last weekend. But there's two things there. First of all, it's Man City at home. Maybe they're getting back into their stride. A discussion that we will have a little bit later, actually, in terms of their attack. But the second thing is obviously Nick Pope was not present. So for me, I think looking at it, I wasn't too worried. And then if you look at the XG conceded, the game against Man City is a huge anomaly because apart from that, they're one of the best teams so far this season in terms of XG conceded. They do amazing work with, yes, they allow a lot of chances, but after that game against Man City, they were one of the best. Now they're in the top 4, so 10.75, and I'd say a fair majority, I think off the top of my head, 3 of that XG came from just that one game against Manchester City. So they're a top 4 defence in terms of expected goals conceded numbers. They don't allow a lot of chances in terms of high quality ones, but they do allow a lot of shots against them. But that's the way that Burnley have always played. And with this kind of turn in fixtures now post Manchester City, 2 4.4 defenders, there's the opportunity there as well to pick up some good clean sheets, but they're nailed. They're both nailed players in that side. And I think going into the Christmas period, at their price point, very cheap, they look like a good way just to make sure. You don't have to play them week in, week out, but at least then you're going to have somebody playing that could pick you up points as well. What do you think about that as a shout there, Ben?
Yeah, look, every year we come into approach this period, and I'm always a big advocate of saying have a deep bench. Even more so this year with regards to the disrupted breakup and obviously COVID just lurking around the corner at every opportunity. So I think maybe we always talk about maybe having 1 or 2. I think you need 3 playing substitutes lined up ready to come in, and it's hard to argue with anything you're saying with regards to those players out that Burnley backline. I know Taylor there's certainly been a lot of chatter on my time with social media, and just because of his price point, like I say, the underlying stats and the data in and around that. Burnley had a very difficult start, injury disrupted, a lot of players missing, but now that back four seems to be settled. Inherently, Sean Dyche does not make a lot of changes, and those that tend to come in, you have the likes of your Phil Bardsley's, your Eric Peters, Kevin Long, so they're all fairly interchangeable. Done, they're all in and around the same style and the type of player, and they're well drilled. And we know that Sean Dyche is he always makes Burnley difficult to beat. They've got a couple of nice fixtures coming over that fixture period. The one, I suppose, they've got a couple of away games. I think would be game week 12 and 13, where they travel to Arsenal and Aston Villa. But then they'll be looking to welcome the likes of Wolves to Turf Moor, and obviously they're going to be out without Raul Jimenez. So that it'll be interesting to see how Wolves line up. And then you've got Leeds, and Leeds aren't as gung-ho as they were, when they first sort of burst into the Premier League. We've seen, since the return of Calvin Phillips, they've registered back-to-back clean sheets. Looking ahead to that, they've got two really solid home games against Sheffield United and Fulham. And like I say, you wouldn't be surprised if Burnley were able to back up, clean sheets successive in those two fixtures. So, we're talking about players who are fairly robust, who will be playing. Like I say, one thing about Sean Dyche, he doesn't make many substitutes and he doesn't rotate heavily. So in and around those Christmas fixtures, it's going to be difficult to try and sort of navigate around that selection minefield. Well, Burnley assets are one of those that you'd maybe look at to say the safer options of what's available out there.
And for you as well, you love a differential, you love low ownership numbers. Matthew Loughton, 0.1% ownership. I mean, that is ridiculous kind of figures there are. I'm surprised you haven't confirmed the transfer already, because that is amazing numbers. And then Charlie Taylor, a bit less of a differential there with 3% ownership. Huge ownership numbers there. But that realistically, there's some bargains to be had there. I think in the defence, I wouldn't waste my money getting in Tarko or Ben Mee. I think they're overpriced for their asset value. Ben Mee 4.9, Tarkowski 5.4 million. And they don't score goals often enough to kind of justify that price, when you could be getting somebody like Reguilon in, who's going to be feeding somebody like Kane. So I think that's a nice way into a solid Burnley backline. Now, the next two are ones that I think are from, two teams that we've been very comfortable watching so far this season. The first one is Bednarak from Southampton, 4.5 priced. But I also like Balbuena from West Ham for 4.4. These are both two players who might get their heads on in terms of aerial duels. They might get some goals. And obviously they're two different sides there. But again, that possibly spreads the risk for people who are worried about any of these teams maybe having a game cancelled because of an outbreak of COVID. So Balbuena, Bednarak, what do you think about those two, Ben, in terms of assets?
I love me Southampton assets. I'm stacked with three players at the moment, and Ings is lurking in the background as one that I'll be looking to bring in. With regards to Bednarek, I mean, I'm looking at. I brought in Vestergaard last week on my fan team, sort of game week 10. 100k game, because I just think there's so much value there and the offer of threat, from set pieces. It was Bednarek that got the goal, so I got that the wrong way around this time. But even Vestergaard is a good one, and so I do like those. In terms of FPL, I plumbed for Bertrand in the hope that I'd probably, that I'd get more of an attacking return, and really that hasn't materialized up until this point. If I was on a wild card, or if I was looking to maybe 2 free transfers and I was looking to do a sideways move, and I didn't necessarily have priorities elsewhere within the squad, then I think I would quite happily move from a Bertrand to a Bednarek or a Vestergaard, to save those additional funds, or even a Walker Peters, to be honest, because Bertrand is, for me at the moment, just struggling to justify that additional money in terms of his price point. And in West Ham, I know we've had this conversation, and I think they performed very well with a 5. I suppose it's a 5 when they defend, and it's almost a 3 when they attack, with Kufal and Cresswell or Masuaku, bombing on a little bit. So, and they've looked good, really good. I'm just wondering, with the reintroduction of Antonio, does that change things maybe to accommodate? We see and also is it Saeed Benarama? If I probably butchered his name, but that was one as well. He's coming to the forefront of David Moyes' thinking. He's impressed from the bench. He supplied another great assist for Jared Bowen on Monday night. And if David Moyes is looking to accommodate some of these attacking assets, like I say, your Fornals, your Bowens, your Antonios, your Benrahma, then maybe, it could mean that West Ham are reverting back to a 4, maybe a flat back 4. And I'm just not as keen on that, West Ham backline as a 4. I think they're really good and solid as a 5. But, like we said with Giroud and like we said with Cavani, Benrahma will be knocking on his door and say, look, I'm producing in limited minutes. I'm impressing in these cameo roles that you're giving me. Give me the opportunity to start now. And that start in the 11 won't be too far away.
Yeah, it's a difficult question in terms of, how is all these amazing talented players going to fit in. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of their kind of setup and formation, because as we saw in the game, one of my assets, Masuaku, actually was brought off, and so that caused a little bit of concern for me. Cresswell, I think, is fine and dandy at the back there, and I think Balbuena will be fine as well. But I don't imagine that Moyes would want to mess with it too much, because he knows how well the team is playing, and also the way that they are playing. They're not really pressing teams. They're happy to kind of sit off the ball. They're happy to kind of manage spaces, and they do that better with 5 at the back than maybe bolstering out the midfield with maybe 4 players there. But you never know. Moyes, I think a lot of people don't give enough credit for as a really good manager. So he might have a second formation, a second kind of setup in mind going forward. And you might be right there that some of these assets might miss out. But my firm belief is that West Ham will continue for the foreseeable with some good fixtures in the not too distant future. So obviously Man United next, but we've seen that they've been mixed so far this season. They have an upward trend. Then Leeds, Crystal Palace, Chelsea, but then after that a sea of green through to January 27th. I think West Ham have the ability to do all right for the medium and longer term, and at that price point, Balbuena or somebody like Masuaku, you can easily bring in and out of the team. This is what the whole price point of these players is, to enable your ability to maybe swap and rotate, as well as factoring injuries around Christmas time. Now, the few cheap enabler midfielders, these are ones that we have discussed before. A few of them. Some of them I put the numbers to you as well, Ben. But so in the cheap midfielders context, I've gone with probably the 2 hottest ones that people are talking about at the moment. It's Podence and Neto for Wolves. Now, Podence is obviously the cheaper of the 2. Neto is on a lot of people's radars because he's the 10th highest scoring midfielder, but he's priced at 5.6. Podence is 5.4. So again, I wasn't too hot, and we both weren't too hot on the way that Wolves played at the start of the season. But then they kind of switched up a gear in that Arsenal game. They produced a competent attacking game, and this was when Raul Jimenez was off the field as well. Obviously, I don't want to base it on one game, but looking at their form over the past 4 games, they've got the fourth best non-penalty xG, non-penalty xG. Let me get my words out. And the fourth best shots in the box. They're a little bit improved. I wouldn't say they're back to their old levels at all, but it seems like Nuno is willing to experiment a bit more with attack as well, because we've seen a change in formation as well, which is more attacking from the team. So I'm warming a little bit to them, and also because of their price point, Neto and Pundits, it's kind of a mistake that you can make. It's kind of a punt that you can take, because it's only 5.6, and that kind of price point there, you can bring them out in and out of your team if they're not playing well, or you can bring them in if you think that they're going to do well, they've got a better opponent. And the final point is of course, we're talking about giving yourself a good, strong squad there. So looking at those two, just from the same team, which one would you choose? And do you like them as a bench warming option to jump on the pitch every so often?
Neto is definitely on my radar. He's one player that I highlighted following the loss of Raul Jimenez. On the rare occasion we haven't seen Jimenez start in the Premier League, Neto was deployed, centrally as a striker. I think initially he was paired with Diogo Jota. Now Nuno might go maybe with a 3-5-2, and he could put him up there with Pundits. But obviously, this upturn in XG and this attacking threat and this maybe more expansive style of play also coincides with the return of Adama Traore. So we don't know what really was happening behind the scenes with Traore, but he seemed way down the pecking order for almost 2 months. He never really got much of a sniff in that first team, but he's back now, and we know what kind of attacking threat that he brings. And for me, it could be that you have that maybe that 3-4-3, and it could be that Neto plays centrally with maybe Pundits and Traore either side. And for that reason, I like Neto. That if he's going to be playing in that advanced role centrally, I think he's worth that extra point to go over Pundits. Although I like Pundits as well, and again he's another player that I sort of highlighted as a possibility of one of those who could benefit in the absence of Raul Jimenez. It forces Wolves to change their style of play, and it also affords the opportunity to some of those players to really sort of stand up and be counted and come out the shadow, and really sort of stake a claim and start making a name for themselves this season, because we mightn't see Raul Jimenez back this season. That could be the reality of the situation. So Wolves will be looking for the next player to step up to the fore, and I think those players are more than capable with Traore of doing that.
And just on that topic there of Jimenez, what's going to happen with Wolves? Off air, this was almost like a little request from you to me. I've done some number crunching. We will end the show on that because I think it's a really fascinating topic, and I think people will be wanting to stay to the end just to listen about that one, just as an example of the stuff that we like to produce here on the Premier Pundits, an insight into data crunching, meeting, injury news there. So the other two that I wanted to mention as cheap enabler midfielders was McGinn and Trezeguet. So they're both as well from Aston Villa. Now, Aston Villa, they're still producing great attacking data. I mean, so over the last 4 game weeks, they've got the most shots in the box. They've got the most chances created. Their XG is second best to Leeds. And they are doing really well. Second top for shots as well in total. Obviously, shots can be a bit of a misconstrued data set, but people are talking all the time about Leeds. They're taking loads of shots, loads of high quality ones. But I tell you what, at 7.97 xg. They're only 0.004 behind Leeds in terms of their expected goals of 8.01. So I'm waxing lyrical still about Villa's attack. Maybe their defence, not so much. I've gone a little bit cooler on them. The likes of Target and Martinez are ones that I would say probably get rid of for now, and maybe return to them later on in the season. Their price point enables you that kind of movement. But McGinn and Trezeguet are two players. We've seen how good McGinn is. Last season he got injured, and I really enjoyed watching him. I was quite sad to see him go out of that Villa team because he's a weirdly unique player. He does a lot of things very well. He's very attacking. He creates a lot of stuff for that Villa attack. I'm hoping that obviously Ross Barkley's back soon to bolster that attack, but Trezeguet's putting out still fantastic numbers, and obviously, he's severely underperformed, but he's second for Bamford for shots inside the box over the last 4 game weeks. He's missed a lot of those chances. He's not scored them, but he's got 2.15 xg. He could be in with a sneaking chance, but maybe he's just not good enough. I don't know. But at 5.3, again, a bit like Neto, a bit like Podence, they're so cheap as chips, that they might be a little punty differential to put in your side.
I try not to get sucker. I feel as if it's a bit of a sucker punch getting hooked on Villa. They're just a little bit too hot and cold for me. We've seen the performances against Arsenal, at Liverpool, and then they get stuffed off the likes of Leeds. They were poor against Brighton. I'm sitting on Ross Barkley, and we'd expect Ross to return in game week 12. And obviously Jack is commanding a lot of interest from the community just because he's the talisman for that side. John McGinn is a player that I looked at. I followed closely just prior to his first big injury, and when he came back, and it was almost like, it's all dress and it's all fair, no knickers there. He was almost flattering to deceive. People were talking about the return of John McGinn as being the saviour for Aston Villa, and I never quite seen it. But Project Restart, he mightn't have got necessarily the returns that he probably deserved, but he did at the beginning of this season, and he started really, really well. And when he's taking over and when he's getting those points returned, Villa are doing well as well. But he's just not for me. And with regards to Trezeguet, he's a player that seems to be talked about for a long, long time. These underlying stats for Trezeguet have always, in my mind, they've always been outstanding. You always feel as if it's a bit of a diamond in the rough there, and he just needs a little bit of a polish, and he will absolutely fly. It's like the Brightons of this world. We talk about, aren't they good, aren't they unlucky, and they should be doing more. You should be doing more, yes, you're right. But when are you actually going to do that? And how much will I have to invest in terms of time and resource before I start recouping some of that trust? And so for that reason, again, I think I'd probably want to see a little bit more. I'd want to see Trezeguet when he's actually producing that end product, as opposed to just maybe, those underlying stats, which suggests you have a good player who is just bubbling underneath the surface.
And I tell you what here, Ben, you can probably call me Mystic McKenna, but something tells me that Trezeguet and McGinn will blank this weekend. So maybe don't get them in this weekend, obviously, if you would consider them. But in terms of it, they're good, cheap enabler midfielders. So maybe more on the McGinn front for you, but out of those cheap enabler midfielders, you're warmer to the Wolves ones. And you can kind of see as well why, because Wolves, those Neto Podence have a high quality, and obviously Neto has really produced it recently. Now, topic that I wanted to bring up, and you can interject as well, Ben, at any point if you've got anything on your mind. But Man United, Man City, Wolves, I feel that their attack is more in form. Now, again, bit of number crunching here, but the Red Devils over the last 4 game weeks, third best non-penalty, Wolves fourth, and Man City fifth. United had the second best big chances over the last 4, and City sit sixth, whereas Wolves and City sit third and fourth for shots in the box over the last 4 games. Now, obviously, it's only a 4 game week period, which I prefer an 8 game week period here. But with the weird slow start to the season and things getting a little bit crazy, but this is something that we've almost been expecting with Man City. The question was, when will they get back to form? We questioned it during Project Restart. They weren't 100% ticking, apart from maybe Sterling. And then coming into the season, there's been this slow start once again. But they've managed to shore up the defence, and I think that was one of the big problems we saw last season. And now the City assets, maybe with a strong defence behind them, maybe with the likes of De Bruyne, maybe just kicking off a little bit, they might be looking better. But we're seeing this with United as well and Wolves. So we've talked about Podence and Neto, but let's maybe focus on United. You own one of their assets in Rashford, but also City, with good underlying data, good fixtures coming up. This is something that, we talked about last week, is kind of jumping on these assets before they become hot. And I think there's a lot of potential with the City and Man United assets, apart from probably Fernandes and maybe Kevin De Bruyne. But even he's not that owned by many in the community. And that's why I mentioned Martial a bit early. But what do you think about their assets there? Or is it still too tough to decide who's going to be playing for Man City in attack? And is it just going to be for Fernandes with Man United?
We'll look at City first, and we're talking about a squad now that it's almost, Pep has with the exception of Sergio Aguero, has a full complement of players at his disposal. So yeah, trying to pick that 11 is going to be difficult. I read an interesting article in The Athletic today, and it may be, again, it's potentially a shift in philosophy or a shift in a way of thinking from Pep, which may have almost kick-started City back into gear. And they were talking about, the absence in recent times of Aymeric Laporte, Raheem Sterling, even Cancelo. And the assumption was always there that, Laporte was nailed in that back line, and almost Raheem Sterling was nailed on the left-hand side as a winger. And regardless of performance, if you're going to pick anybody, those are the ones that you would go for. There was obviously concerns with regards to Laporte, who has picked up quite a couple of serious injuries during his time down at the Etihad. And we always assumed that when Laporte was out of the team, he was being rested. It was a tactical switch with one eye on the next game or the busy fixture period. Now, interestingly, Pep's come out and he said, I'm not bothered about, resting players. I'm not concerned about fatigue. I'm picking this starting 11 based on how these players are performing in training and, in terms of their effort, in their attitude, in their application, which, it's almost like a kick up the backside to the likes of the Sterlings and the Laportes, and also to the rest of the squad to say, well, actually, you know what? If I'm going out and doing that on the training pitch, then yeah, I will be rewarded. City have got Ferran Torres now that can be put in that City attack. And I think it's almost dragging City out of this. And, you don't want to say slump because, City maybe have been a little bit unfortunate in games, and it's certainly not a slump. It's not a Sheffield United slump. But, and I know people will only say it's Burnley, but, we're talking about a team that doesn't give up. a lot of big chances. That their XG was one of the best in the league. I think it's still top 4 even after that. But City went out and done a proper job on them. They still have to beat the team up before, and maybe that's a sign of intent and a signaling of just a changing of the tide and a changing of form in a way that City players are kicking back into gear. Under this change from maybe Pep opposed to what we've seen maybe in previous seasons.
And with the assets as well, it worries me because Torres has kind of almost come in to replace Sterling. We saw it last week. Riyad Mahrez is battling in there. There doesn't seem to be a safe place now, maybe apart from Diaz, De Bruyne, possibly Walker, but maybe Cancelo will come in there because for some reason Pep is still in love with Mendy, and then you got Edison as well as probably. There's only 3 or 4 players in that side that you can keep as nailed, and this is possibly a positive thing for Pep that this season he's got a little bit more rotation. Aki can come in for Laporte. He can keep these players on their toes, but the flip side for us as the FPL community is, oh crap, now Laporte isn't nailed. We're not definitely going to see Sterling. And this is something that I've seen it as a Sterling owner, with my sunk loss, sunk whatever we want to call it. It's huge problems because he didn't even come on the pitch last week. It was dreadful. In a 5-0 game, I thought he would at least maybe come on and assisted or scored, during those final few minutes where teams kind of give up the ghost. But it's neither here nor there. Let's not worry about that. What we need to worry about is for the FPL community. And I still can't sit easy with owning maybe anybody apart from Big Kev. I might make the move this week just almost for safety's sake of it's boring, but Sterling to De Bruyne, just because I want coverage for that Fulham game. You can't guarantee things in football at all, and we saw last week Fulham suddenly turned up against Leicester. They shocked them. So, Man City might be in for the same sort of treatment, but Fulham have been so leaky in defence that to not have a Man City asset in that game for me, I'll be slapping the captain's armband on whoever I decide to have in that match. It would be a great oversight if I wasn't to capitalise on that situation there.
Look, you would expect City to back up that performance from Burnley with and going out there and doing a job on Fulham. Scott Parker will come out and talk about how his side will not fear City, how they arrive in a lot of confidence. Certainly the introduction of Joachim Andersen into the Fulham backline seems to have improved and improved that little bit of solidarity. Loftus-Cheek finally seems to have settled, and he was rewarded last week with his first start in a while, having impressed from the bench the week before that. Cavallero up front can score penalties by all accounts, so that's good. But look, the quality that City have in every single department. I'm sitting on 2 defensive assets, and you say prior to last week, I would have said Diaz and Walker were the 2 which were nailed. However, when I heard prior to kick off that John Stones was starting for City, my first thought was Diaz is out of that lineup, and it was a concern. So I have that still have that nagging doubt in the back of my mind that maybe Diaz isn't as nailed as I would like to have think he was, or I'm not sure. And I'm also of the same mind with maybe Kevin De Bruyne, given the fact that he picked up a niggling muscular injury at the start of the season, and that City have so many great attacking assets. Nobody quite like Kevin, but maybe against lesser opposition, and I'm not saying that against Fulham, but maybe in and around Christmas, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some heavy rotation, and Kevin would be included in that. I think Phil Foden could quite easily step into that role. You could sit in. You've got Rodri and Fernandinho who can sit in behind, and then you've got everybody else. You don't have to worry about defending when you've got those there with your either a back three or a back four, and then you've got your likes of your Mahrez, your Sternals, your Jesus, your Bernardos, all of those players who can come in and win games single-handedly.
Let's move it on to the final little bit that I was putting it to you, because I think we've covered the Wolves assets maybe a little bit, but obviously I said we're going to finish up the show with a deep analysis of it. But the United assets, now Fernandes, I think everybody is considering him. He's the F word for us because he just seems to punish us week in, week out and giving us red arrows. But Martial was somebody that I loved having in my team last season. I seemed to own him at the right times when he was doing bits and bobs here and there. Rashford hasn't been himself this season, and Cavani is not nailed. So looking at their attacking assets, we're talking about an improved attack here. How do we get into this squad that, first of all, we're not sure who's going to be starting, but also they're not putting enough of these chances away? Yes, they got, one of the best XGs, but to the same extent, they're not putting them enough away. Most of their goals are from penalties. Look at the West Brom game. Everybody thought West Brom at Old Trafford, they're going to get demolished, but they've only won one game at Old Trafford all season, and that wasn't a demolition performance that we're expecting from the Red Devils at home against one of the worst teams in the Premier League this season. So yes, the data's good, but maybe looking with the eye test on this one, do you think it would be sheer lunacy to get somebody like Martial or Rashford or Cavani in?
It's difficult to make a really strong case for any of those at this moment in time. If I was pushed, hand on heart, I think it would be Cavani would be the risky punt that I would go for, and that's based purely on the fact that he deserves his chance to start, and he deserves those minutes to see what he can do. Because I don't think Martial's done enough this season. He just doesn't look happy to me, ever. Just ever. He doesn't look like he enjoys football. And if you're not playing football with a smile on your face and enjoying it, then that's maybe reflected in your performances. Rashford, for me as well, looks as almost if he's played with the weight of the world on his shoulders, that weight of expectation. We forget, he's still a young lad. And maybe we're seeing the performances that I want in the Premier League in the Champions League. He's doing very little. He was very poor. He was on the peripherals of the game last week, and it was a get out of jail. His assist for Cavani in the end, which earned a nice little assist. But other than that, I forgot he was even on the pitch. And he maybe the shoulder problem is hampering him a little bit, and that's causing a little bit of concern. He's a player that inherently has been starting under Solskjaer, so there may be an element of just fatigue or just a little bit jaded, just a little bit, like I say, a little bit tired, coming off carrying that injury and playing, those 3 games a week, a lot of minutes under his belt. Maybe he would benefit just from being taken out of that lineup. So for me, Fernandes is the one that you cannot argue with. Every week I expect Fernandes to dip, to stop producing the numbers that he's been, the standout figures that he's been producing since he arrived in England. But it isn't happening. And given the fact that, United win so many penalties and he plays so well away from Old Trafford, and he's on basically everything and he takes over and he's a bonus point machine, it'd be ludicrous for Fernandes not to be in your thoughts or certainly on your radar. But if, like me, he's a little bit too mainstream in template, then I do like Cavani. But like I say, it would be on the understanding that he isn't going to be starting every match. And there's always going to be a rotation risk in and around that.
And people who've listened to us for a long time, this is almost sheer pornographic, filthy Fernandez talk. For us to even be kind of entitling the ideas with some thoughts in us. But it is a real concern in my team. After going down to 500k, I've even had thoughts of the wild card. I mean, this is big stuff. I don't like to play it this early.
This is pressure, Jay. This is what pressure does to you.
Yes, I haven't pulled it yet though, and I don't know if I will, because I could send it to you. I could discuss a potential wildcard team on air, and it looks so fun. But I still like quite a lot of my assets, so it doesn't necessarily need to be done. But there's some assets here that I want to talk about. I don't know if many people have discussed this in the community, but Chelsea and Southampton are blowing people away with their set piece work. I mean, it is crazy good stuff. And the reason why I focus on it is because Chelsea and Southampton haven't had like lots and lots of set pieces, but they're really kind of consistent with them. So since game week 7, the Saints and Chelsea are standout sides with set pieces, 5 and 4 goals each. Plus, over the course of the season, the two are the top 2 for set piece goals, although Southampton do draw with a few other teams as well. But Chelsea are standout for the set pieces. So yeah, over the course of the season, they don't have the highest XA or XG from these situations, but obviously what they've done is put those chances away. And looking at the assets that kind of jump out to me. Now, with Chelsea, it's kind of hard to know who's going to take the set pieces. Obviously, Chilwell's on the corners, so that's good. And I think a load of people in the community have him in already, so I think it's a bit redundant to talk about him. But the other one that I like, and I think people are getting him because of his clean sheet performances, but he'll get his head onto the ball as well, is Kurt Zouma. I think he's in terms of aerial duel wins, he has the highest aerial duel wins in the Chelsea side. So he's a good one to have in the air for those moments, whether it be a free kick or a corner situation. And then obviously in Southampton, it's got to be Ward-Prowse and maybe somebody like Vestergaard. Vestergaard's already got 2 goals, 4.7 price. He could, he's sniffing near that kind of below 4.5 price point that I put for cheap enabler defenders, but he's got the height. He's going to be involved there, and we've seen it so many times this season. Ward-Prowse, but with the Chelsea set piece takers, maybe Ziyech will be more involved now that he's in the side. But we've seen Mount take them. We've seen Chilwell take them. It's a bit of a harder one. Even Reece James has taken some of the set pieces, so that one's a harder choice. Whereas with penalties and free kicks, or maybe just free kicks, because when Ings comes back in, Ward-Prowse will be on the set pieces no matter what. So that makes him really enticing. So I think that's a fair discussion point there. And I mean, you've already got Ward-Prowse. You've already said about Vestergaard. You probably couldn't get him in because you're either going to look at maybe a sideways move from Bertrand, but if not, your eyes are on the prize of Danny Ings. But Zouma, I mean, do you like the sound of him? Chelsea are doing really well. One of the, if not the best defence recently in terms of XG conceded. They're looking so good. The lowest XG conceded the season, and also the highest clean sheets. I mean, an easy way into that side there.
This is the FPL Ben and the Ben that watches the football, and the difficulty between differentiating between the two. The reality is I've already got 3 Chelsea players anyway. So I've got Chilwell sitting in that back 4. I've got Ziyech in midfield, and I've got Werner up front. So, it would take a little bit of reshuffle to get Zuma in. But the fact that despite what he's doing in terms of fantasy returns and points, as a player, as an eyes-on player, I cannot stand him. I think he's absolute garbage. I really do. I just do not rate him. Maybe he's improved a little bit this season, but I see the Zuma from Everton, who just, he reminds me a little bit of Titus Bramble. On one game week, he can look like a world beater, and you question, why isn't he playing at a higher level at a better club? But then he's got that mistake or two in his locker, and then you realise, well, that's why. And I struggle to shake that mental image that I've got of Zuma, and I just perceive him as being, like I say, just a player who's just got that one mistake in him, and I wouldn't, for that reason alone, I would never, ever, ever consider putting Zuma in my fantasy team. Apologies, Kurt. It is nothing personal.
See, that was my next news, is that Kurt is actually one of our biggest fans, and he loves tuning in, week out. So we've now we've gone down one view. So, sorry, now we've lost Kurt.
But what I would say to you is, once again, I'm not sure what's happened to my system, but my camera, ever the professional, my camera went off again. About 10 minutes in. So I'm just staring at a blank screen, hoping you can see me. And you would never have known that, how I professionally just managed to skirt over that fact.
I didn't notice at all, and I was going to say that looking fine. There was no change whatsoever. Rocking the Ralphie. Not sure if you're flashing a Swiss watch at all. You're looking like
No. I'm rocking the Whoop.
Oh, okay. So more like health benefits and stuff, which is equally as kind of flashy as a Swiss. So the final points that I kind of wanted to raise was, I think Tottenham defence is a good one to have. I'm going to mention him again. He's a bit like Zuma to you, almost a swear word. I'm going to say his name.
And I am warming.
Eric Dyer. 4.9. He just seems like such a steal. I think so many people are sleeping on him as an asset, because Tottenham are, again, repeating the points of last week, it's a Mourinho team, and Mourinho season 2 always does bits, and as an Arsenal fan, that's what worries me. I'm like, God, this is Mourinho season 2, this is when he generally wins leagues. I'm like, don't let it happen. But in terms of FPL assets, looks so good with defensive assets there. Region is probably the more premium one, but at 4.9, I mean, that's ridiculous stuff there. Get Eric Dyer in. That's one of the things that I will say to the community. And yes, people will throw back, but oh my God, he's got to play Arsenal, Liverpool, Leicester in the next few games. But they just walked away with 3 back-to-back clean sheets, 2 of them against Man City and Chelsea. I think Mourinho knows what he's doing with a firm defence. And Arsenal, I mean, paltry attacking performances all season. Yes, they might turn up a little bit, but realistically, where are the chances going to come from? Obviously, the Liverpool one might be a difficult one, because Liverpool are one of the best teams in Europe. But then Leicester, Leicester are bottom this season for chances created, even less so than West Brom. Their 15 XG over the last few games is just from the fact that they get loads of penalties. So that would worry me as a Vardy owner. And then, you got the flip side of Vardy. Now, I did a little bit of number crunching on Antonio, but just before we get into the Antonio discussion, because obviously this whole discussion that I'm about to present is redundant, is he going to have his minutes managed over the next few weeks, Ben?
I would think so. It's always a concern when you've got any player who's had historically the number of hamstring related problems that he has had. given that some of the attacking options that David Moyes has at his disposal, there aren't necessarily the pressures on David Moyes to rush Mikel Antonio back into the squad. I was very surprised that he started, on Monday night, given that he hadn't been involved in a great deal of sessions, and Haller had actually scored the winning goal previous to that. But he only played 45 minutes. And like I say, maybe Moyes feels that, we do have other players who can come in. West Ham are performing quite well, so you don't have the pressures there. Even having no crowd there would help in that respect. There's nothing worse than 40 or 50 or 60,000, spectators shouting to bring a player on and, getting into the mindset of a manager. And yeah, David Moyes is very experienced and he's very tactically astute. But he will be looking to manage Mikel Antonio, because especially in this build up to this festive fixture period, because even if he picked up another minor hamstring issue, even if you're looking at maybe 2 to 3 weeks, potentially you're looking at maybe 5, 6, or 7 games.
And that's the thing that worries me about Antonio. Maybe it's a bit premature to have this discussion here, but I number crunched on his data here, and looking at his individual kind of project restart last 4 games, West Ham's attack was amazing. They had lots of shots in the box, high XG, and he himself, he scored 6 goals off a 4.54 XG, so slight overperformance, but still quite good. This season, before his injury, he scored 3 goals off a 3 expected XG, 15 shots in the box. In that short amount of time, he was looking great. And again, West Ham's attack, when Antonio was fit, 54 shots inside the box. They scored 12 goals. Bit of an overperformance on a 9.72 XG, but they still look great because 58 chances created. They were looking good. And then obviously since Antonio's injury, the attackers kind of waned quite a bit. They've only had 4.14 XG, 31 shots inside the box, 5 goals, which is still fairly impressive, but not to the heights that it once was, obviously in Project Restart or a little bit earlier. So I'm excited to see what West Ham can do, but I think coupled with my excitement of what West Ham can do is adding to this is what Benrahma can do for Antonio, because I think he's a really classy player. And I watched him in the Championship last season. I thought he was an amazing creative player. He was part of the reason why Ollie Watkins did well. And we've seen that Watkins is doing all right in a Southampton, Aston Villa side, with Grealish, with some really competent midfielders. So his transition's been nice. And I think, playing Benrahma alongside somebody like Antonio, that's going to make them link up very nicely together. It's just as you said there, when he's fully fit. So maybe it's a bit premature to kind of discuss it, but he's going to be getting some high quality service. So when Antonio is ready to bang, I'm going to be ready to get him back in. But let's move it then on to the final discussion here, Ben. This was a special request from you, and it's Wolves' attack with and without Jimenez. And I wanted to preface this by actually saying how much Jimenez contributed to last season's goal tally. 49% of Wolves' 51 goals last season came through Jimenez, either through his 17 goals or 8 assists. I mean, that's astronomical numbers there. And it shows you he truly is a talisman. But what worries me a little bit, that maybe Wolves might not be able to have this upward trend, and why it's all right to own Neto because he's that price, but maybe more premium assets, not so much, is Jota and Doherty contributed 25% of the goal output last season. So, let's have a rough estimate here, 49% plus 25%, that's nearly 74% of Wolves' goals, creative players, are now gone or injured. So really, really kind of huge blows there. Now, obviously, 2 of those have been replaced in a sense, although Semedo does slightly different things to Doherty. Semedo's more of a dribbler, whereas Doherty kind of took players on it by passing to his teammates. And the Jota, I don't think you can really replace him because he's just a really special talent. So I think the problem here is obviously Wolves are very consistent, but they don't have a deep squad, and it's looking like Fabio Silva is going to be replacing him, because the side deployed 4-2-3-1 against Arsenal, and that they continued that after Jimenez's injury, and Fabio Silva kind of sat in front, whereas Neto, Podence, Traore kind of flanked either side and through the middle. So for me, it'll be fascinating to see if Fabio Silva kind of keeps that place, or if, you know, Neto is played as a false nine, and maybe Matinho is given more of a creative role. Neves, Dendoncker maybe playing as a pivot behind him. That will be of a huge interest to me. But if he is played, 5.2 striker, again, pretty cheap as chips way into that. But realistically, he only had 192 minutes played last season for Porto, scored once. It would be a real baptism of fire. But then they paid 35 mil for him. If he's going to play, now's the time to kind of prove it. So what I would say is, it's worrying to me a little bit, but I looked at the only times that Jimenez hasn't played for Wolves, and to be fair, it was only 3 games, so I couldn't divulge too much. But kind of their usual chances created per game in 2018-19 was about 9.16 per game. They generated about an XG per game of 1.39, and in those 2 games they had above that and then below that. So it's kind of hard to make any kind of judgments there. And then the next one was a Liverpool versus Wolves game in the 2019-20 season. And in that game, Wolves generated 0.51, but you have to contextualise 0.51 XGs against Liverpool. Liverpool are one of the best defences. They only created 6 chances, only had 4 shots inside the box. But what for me is more noticeable is, again, this is where the data is coming in, proving almost an eye test here, as Wolves probably had their best attacking data in the 2018-19 season. You know, they had 4.68 shots on target per game, whereas it went down in 2019-20, but then you could say expected goals per game was up in 2019-20, so maybe the shots they were taking were higher quality. But that's neither here nor there. We're comparing 2 old seasons. What I can say is the average of those 2 seasons in the Premier League, this season, all the data is much lower. From, let's say, a base of maybe 1.4 XG per game in the first 2 seasons, now Wolves are only producing 1.03. That's a real big reduction by about 30%. Then big chances created is down from about, let's say, again, go middles, 1.6 per game to 0.9. Chances per game has gone down as well. That's what's worrying. And they've lost Jimenez, who's a 49% creation. Where's that going to come from in a season where Wolves haven't played as attacking? Is it a formation? Is it a tactic thing? And we'll see maybe post-Christmas that, you know, you had your idea that they were kind of holding back and they'll kick on post-Christmas. But is this more of an issue with the loss of Jota and Doherty as well? Do you have like any kind of feelings on that, Ben? You know, because obviously we liked Neto, but the flip side is Wolves statistically aren't what they were. And until we kind of see more longevity of that, we have to just go with that data.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the close season, and I was, my first thought was the loss of Doherty was almost, would have a bigger impact on Wolves. Jota's quality was unquestioned, but I didn't see him as always nailed in that Wolves lineup. You know, there were instances where he was in and out of the team. He was quite streaky. I think at the beginning of 2019-20, he had that bit of a toe issue when he was in and out of the side. And I thought that Wolves could maybe, getting the price that they got for Jota was great, and that they could, look elsewhere and accommodate players in and around that. And it was the loss of Doherty which was a concern with me, particularly that link up with Traore. But as we've seen during those early weeks, I think it looks like it's Jota is the player that they're really missing. I found Wolves just a little bit mechanical and stale and boring. Since the start of the season, it's only in the last 2 to 3 games that I've actually picked up a little bit and enjoyed a little bit more their performances. And Nuno has come out and basically echoed those sorts of saying, where our position in the league isn't necessarily reflected by our performances on the pitch, because I feel we could be much better, and we're not producing the type of football that I want us to produce. There are a concerted effort to change their style of play, and maybe that's just the squad beginning to adapt and learn, to this new method or approach to their football now in the Premier League. You've got players coming in. You've got the Semedos, you've got the Marcals, even Kilman coming into that side as well. Players who are coming in really to that first team for the first time, particularly those foreign lads. It's a new environment, so it's going to take them a little bit while to settle. And maybe those performances will come from Wolves as those players will become, better integrated into the side, and they become more used to the physicalities of playing in the Premier League.
Sorry about that. My thing sometimes freezes.
I'm looking at the screen, and I'm thinking, for all I know, there mightn't be anybody there. I mean, you could be getting murdered for all I know, and I'm just talking away, and you're like screaming and get your heads, chopped off, and and I'm just like that. I will try Orient. Yeah.
No, the thing is, sometimes my mouse just doesn't connect, and then I have to press it a few times, and I'm like, they're panicking because I'm like, oh God, he's going to think that I've lost interest in what he's saying, but not at all. I'm hanging on your every word there, Bennett, as always. But I think we've covered a lot in this podcast here, and this is what we always give to the community each week. We like people sending in questions as well, so in future people do make sure to join in, and the best sort of way to join in is live. And just to repeat what we said at the beginning, and it's just the easy 3-step process here to enter and possibly win £50 towards your Christmas here. Step 1, just download the HotMic app or get your friends or family to do so. Step 2 is to enter the promo code BEN10, and then you'll subscribe to us. And then step 3, post comments in our chats, and you'll be entered, and you can post as many comments as you want. You can do lots of entries there. You can do it from multiple accounts. Get your friends, family involved, because I'm sure they want to know about the Premier League. So those are the 3 steps. And then on game week 14, the Chelsea versus West Ham match is when we'll announce the winners. And I don't know if Ben is doing 3 or are you doing some gang symbols there?
That was Dusty Bin 3, 2, 1. No, it might be a little bit before your time, Jay. But
oh, okay. See, I don't know that. I thought you were throwing some gang symbols there.
Oh, have you? Oh, hey, you'll have to do 3, 2. There was a quiz show many moons ago with Dusty Bin, and it was called 3, 2, 1, and he scored 3, 2, 1.
Oh, there you go. You know what? I'll ask my dad about that, because
make me feel a little bit old there. Yeah, ask your dad.
Because you're probably a couple of years older than me, so you might have seen a few more TV shows in those 2 years that you were on the earth than me that I wouldn't have seen.
Those couple of years.
Yeah, but that's the steps then for the £50 Amazon gift card. all for Christmas. You'll have it in time for the big day. Something to unwrap from us as a gift to you for your continued support there. But yeah, Ben, just to wrap it up, and maybe, you can then go off air and abuse me for calling you old. But well, is there anything else that you want to wrap up with or talk about? Because I think we filled in with a lot there for the community, but there was a lot of important discussions.
No, yeah, I think you've raised some really good points, and I particularly love your those differentials that you're throwing out with those underlying stats, those players who are bubbling under the surface, and who are available at price points that allow enablers within your squad to maybe dip in and bring in the Fernandez. We go back to the start of the show, at the top of the show. We're coming into a period now where you're going to need a deep bench, a strong bench, a bench that you have players who are, nailed down as they possibly can be in and around that period. So, if COVID rears its ugly head, or rotation, or injury, or even suspension, then you've got players to come in, and hopefully you won't be, hit by taking a minus to bring in transfers into your squad.
Yeah, I think this is what that's why I wanted to start the discussions with that, because I think that's one of the most important points going into this Christmas period. Big bench, big beefy bench, just getting some players that will definitely play. And that this is something that I'm looking at with my team as well. It's not fashionable, it's not something that I really want to do, but I look at it, I've got Davies, who doesn't play for Aston Villa, Stevens, who I thought, will come off the bench and he'd get me appearance points, but he's now not really selected by Burnley, and also he's been injured. And then Masuaku, who's fine, obviously he will come on and get me appearance points. That's a good one to own, but I've got two slots there that basically I have to worry about that. Oh God, if one or two players are out, if there's a COVID incident with any one of those players, like we've seen with Mo Salah, then suddenly I might not have 11 players that week. And that is just the basic kind of, line that you need to have 11 players on the pitch each game week. So, yeah, I think it's mighty important advice to have at this time. But that does mean we're coming to the end of the show here. We're winding it up, and it's been fun as always on this Thursday night, giving you the most up-to-date injury news and the latest data to put into your teams for this game week.
Yeah, look, Jason, as always, with those calls, brilliant. It's almost even part of me that thinks, I wish I had a help on that wild card. After me, disastrous what it was. Because, coming into this period, there's a lot, like I say, a lot of players who are demanding your attention, and at those price points, they become hard to overlook with their upcoming fixtures. But alas, I think I might hopefully be able to carry a free transfer over this week, and I would shuffle me pack towards that festive program. So I look forward to hearing more suggestions and more recommendations from yourself, either on Monday's show, where we'll be covering Brighton against Southampton, which is the last fixture of game week 11, and also next Thursday, where we'll be doing another live Q&A ahead of game week 12.
But for now, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody and good luck, but maybe not as much good luck as I need this weekend.
Yeah, and it's a goodbye from me, but it'll be a slightly delayed goodbye, as I haven't got me the button to actually end this video call. So hopefully in the post edit, Jason can get around this little anomaly, and I'll try to figure out how they can shut the camera down. But yeah, look, good luck, guys, unless you're in my mini league, and in which case I hope you bomb. But for now, over and out.